let's
guys
talk
are the
then.
first.
Yes, well,
Great,
we're
very
grateful
good.
for that. So let's talk about the outreach to classrooms because I think that's what Paulo has in front of him. These are, I guess, 3D printed coral polyps. They look like tiny little volcanoes with Medusa hair. It's kind of hard
Medusa
to
hair, yeah.
describe it, but they're very compelling visually. Certainly, they draw attention.
I'm glad you find them compelling. And the idea is that nowadays you gotta make science compelling, engage and draw people to what you're doing. So in terms of the timeliness for why we're here, we've been developing this for the past few months, and we released it about 4 weeks ago. And we also made an educational video that goes along with this. Now, corals are tiny. Most of them, there are exceptions, of course, but most of them are about the size of a grain of rice. But it's a little bit harder to see exactly what they are. And there's a lot of complexities that you don't see with the naked eye. So we made a model of one polyp. In reality, a colony is what forms a reef. You have a whole bunch of these little guys working together. But one polyp is an animal, and it's an amazing animal, one that has a partnership with a symbiotic algae within it. So the model that we have here, you can see that we created this on Autodesk, and we modeled the skeletal structure that is form the basis, the calcium carbonate basis of a coral. And then you can see the animal aspect, the Medusa hair that you mentioned. There's tentacles and a mouth when they are together, and then when you split it apart, they fit
It's a
together.
cross
Like Lego.
section. Yeah, so it's about the size of a coffee mug. I'd say if you've seen the giant teeth in your dentist's office, it's kind of reminiscent of that in terms of the calcium or the gums at the bottom and the structure of it. But it's pretty cool. So the students get to handle this, and you can talk about that structure.
Exactly, and they get to see the skeleton. I say that's a skeleton very much like we have in a skeleton. Here's the animal part, and the tentacles and the mouth in there, and sometimes if I have little pieces of whatever, they can fit it in there. But the cool part is that we also made it dynamic. We mentioned that climate change is one of the main threats that we are working to address. It's a major threat to coral reefs, and when water temperatures get too hot, they bleach, meaning that they lose that symbiotic relationship with the algae. And then what you see, it's called bleaching because what you see is the entire coral colony turning white. You're actually seeing the skeleton. So what I'm going to do here is a little bit of science magic.
Oh, my Lord.
So
there's actually a demonstration. So I'm taking a video. We'll post that on our show notes at bytemarkscafe.org as well.
So maybe you can help me by describing what you see here. So I brought a little bit of hot water, which is the equivalent of a very, very modern ocean, right there in the middle of a summer.
Or say
maybe
Kaneohe Bay.
Kaneohe Bay, late summer. And then we're going to see what happens when we expose a coral to these very elevated ocean temperatures. So maybe you can describe what you're seeing here.
So this, what was, I guess,
Blue
a blue
previously.
coral is now a very light blue. It's already turned white. It's very bleached looking.
Exactly. So at this, and thank you for helping here along. But what you see here is a coral basically that lost a symbiotic relationship, and it turns white. You're seeing basically through the skeleton. But now I want you to tell the audience what you're seeing in the tip.
So the tip's staying a kind of a darker shade of blue, or is it already
Did it
coming
recover
back? Is it recovering?
from the heat? So it's cooling off, and now it's turning back to the blue color.
You guys are natural scientists.
Oh,
So a coral bleaching event, are you saying, is not a distinctly or always a fatal event for a coral?
Absolutely. So a bleaching event is not a death sentence. The corals can recover if it's short enough. Normally, if it's under 4 weeks and the corals haven't been stressed too much before that, they can come back just like in the model that it had turned white, but now you see the color coming back. So that means that the coral that we have here is a very resilient and strong coral.
Well, I feel like a very engaged student right now, and you had others as well. Like they some glow in the dark and take light and can be bioluminescent, and some others don't. So, what has the reaction been? You've said you've only just made these. Have you been able to deploy them in real classrooms?
So we've been going to many outreach events. We were at the Ko'olina event for the World Oceans Day, a very cool event where they show Moana in Hawaiian. And we were showing this, so we're going to the Waikiki Aquarium and all these other places. And I just have lines of students that want to try this out. And they see it, but they all want to hold the coral, put it in water, torture it a little bit, but see it come to life, come back to life. And all along, I'm basically using that engagement to teach them about concepts that normally are a little bit harder for
More
them to get
abstract,
across.
yeah.
Resiliency and symbiosis, and basically forming a reef, and how we depend with them.
And do you see the students sort of taking an interest in sort of marine life, and maybe perhaps pursuing, or maybe talking to the teacher about finding out more about the corals and the life cycle?
Absolutely. Just now, outside waiting for this interview in your studio, I had two young students
Oh
My
yeah.
kids, yes.
that were absolutely in love with the corals that they were seeing here, and they wanted to see how they work, and they wanted to see how they glow. So, by the way, I should mention that what we made the model, and it can be printed in different materials. So the one that I brought here is a thermal sensitive material, but it can be printed on ultraviolet sensitive filaments. So then, basically, you have endless possibilities to create a natural.
And this is a
fake reef.
NOAA creation, your creation. So presumably, you would be, if you have 3D printing capability, you can make one yourself.
Absolutely, that's the idea. So we
right.
release it out for the
Very
public.
good. That's
Oh,
great,
thank you,
and
Paulo.
I love this the detail and the descriptions that you've allowed us to sort of give the audience a sense of what the experiment looks like.